Greetings, Cleveland, and welcome to Creative Focus, the show that illuminates some of Cleveland's most talented and creative artists across the genres of film, dance, music, theater, and visual arts. I'm your host, Cornell Calhoun III, and I'm honored, truly honored, to have as our guest today, Cleveland's own award-winning Broadway playwright, Mr. Eric Coble. Eric, welcome to Creative Focus, man. Let's chop it up.
All right, thank you. Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I want to get this out of the way. I want to tell you actually why you're on my show, because I wanted some of your genius to rub off on me.
Oh, well, okay. I was hoping it would go the other direction, but that's all right. That is fine too.
Just an incredible resume. You are the benchmark for playwrights. And correct me if I get anything wrong. So you've had plays produced in all 50 states, in Poland, Israel, Mexico, and Spain. You've had 32 plays published. In comparison, I've had one.
Okay. Just
numerous awards, Cleveland Art Prize, Emmy, Tony, Pulitzer nominations, plays off Broadway, Bright Eyes, and special effects. What's the other play off Broadway?
There was Bright Ideas, and then
Bright
Side
Ideas,
Effects.
Side Effects may be included,
yeah.
And then culminating with The Velocity of Autumn on Broadway. I mean, that title, The Velocity of Autumn. I mean, I must have said it like 30 times because Dorothy Silver, and we'll talk about her later, my mentor, she called me to tell me about that show. And she said, "Oh, Cornell, you've got to come to the Beck Center and see The Velocity of Autumn by Eric Coble. It's just an incredible show." And I thought about it and I said, The Velocity of Autumn. I mean, that title, the only title that I can recall that affected me like that was Carson McCullers' The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. I mean, that's a title that you know. So I just want to ask you, would you say that The Velocity of Autumn is your defining moment so far as a playwright, or no?
I think it's a defining moment. It is one. It's the best known of my pieces. It's the one that's opened the most doors and has had the most exposure. I think every play feels different to me and has succeeded or failed in its own ways, and so I don't. It's hard for me to find like a piece and say like that's the one, that's me up there on that stage or something, because they're all little facets of me, and they're all like children, right? There's that. I mean, it's hard to pick a favorite play. Sometimes I got some less favorite children, I guess, but they're not. That's not in the plays, not in the real world. But it is. Yeah. I mean, The Velocity has reached the most people, and has spoken in ways that I didn't anticipate. That was one of the nice things about it. When I was writing it, I didn't see what course it was on at all. It's been a good adventure, a good ride for me with that show.
So in terms of the title, did you have the title before you worked the script, or did it just come to you?
Yeah, it was pretty early. I don't remember exactly when I thought of it, but it was it kind of came together early on in the script. I think I knew the story before I knew the title, but the title came pretty early. There was a point at which, when it was getting ready to move to Broadway, that people were like, is that too complex a title? Should we simplify it? And so we went through all these other possible titles. And we spent weeks going through all these things to maybe change it. And for me, it always just kept coming back to, I just like The Velocity of Autumn. It has that nice, as you say, it's got a real resonance to it, and it sounds good. It flows off the tongue. And I just, so we stuck with that. And I'm really glad we did. We never came up with a better one.
So was the world premiere the Broadway, the Beck Center production?
That wasn't the world premiere. That was the second production, though. That was the one. And that one helped move it toward New York for sure. Yeah, the Beck Center was a big step on that. Its world premiere was at a little company in Boise, Idaho. The Boise Contemporary Theater. I mean, that's one of the things I learned with Velocity, was that it had is to not give up on plays. Because I wrote the play, I liked the play, people who read it seemed to like it, but my agent sent it around to theaters, and it was like, no, got all no's across the board. And through a weird circumstance, the artistic director at the Boise Contemporary Theater heard it and fell in love with it immediately and say, we're going to produce it. We'll absolutely do the world premiere. And I said, sure. Nobody else was asking for it at that point. And so, so they did it, and they did a really good production. And then it began to catch on. Other people began to hear about it. And the Beck Center was the second production with Dorothy. And then that began to its kind of climb out in some weird ways toward Broadway.
So where was the production prior to Broadway? Do you remember?
It was at Arena Stage.
It was Arena Stage
in D.C., Washington, D.C.
Okay, all right.
That was the same cast and director. Everything was the same, and then we just moved that to New York.
Okay, I just wanted to share with the audience some quotes.
Okay. I hope they're good ones. There's so many bad ones out there. It's nice to hear the good ones sometimes.
Coble's hilariously funny, psychologically astute portraits hit home with rib-tickling acuity. New York Times. Coble's work is a tour de force with physical and verbal comedy to spare. The New Yorker. Funnier than anything on Broadway. New York Post. Comedies are of all things generally funny. Newsday. It strikes me that a lot of people don't realize how difficult it is to get a play on Broadway. Oh, yeah. Even theater people, maybe unless you're a writer. But would you say that's the ultimate for a playwright?
I don't think it's the hardest. It would be the hardest to do just because the window is so small, right? There's only so many theaters. Everything has to go right to make it happen. So it's the most difficult that way. I wouldn't say it's the best, honestly. I mean, I think some of the best theater I've ever seen has been at little theaters. We were talking about Dabama Theater earlier, back when they were in a basement in Cleveland Heights. And some of the best theater I've ever seen was in that space. So I don't think, I don't personally attach the best quality to Broadway. It's great. I mean, you can see brilliant things on Broadway, but I think one of the things I love about theater is that it happens, great stuff happens in so many different places, and places you don't expect. So I would say it's kind of the hardest mountain to climb as a playwright to get to Broadway, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're the best, or that this was your best play, or that this is I mean, it marks that you made it through the eye of a very little needle, is what it means. That's really what it marks.
Okay, and what would be the distinction, because I know the audience may be curious if they don't know, what would be the distinction between off-Broadway and Broadway?
It's which theater it's in. The Broadway houses tend to be bigger, and there's less of them. And then off-Broadway has smaller budgets and does more experimental work. The Broadway theaters have to appeal to the widest possible audience usually. So that's why you have the big musicals, Wicked and Lion King and those kind of things that'll appeal to tourists coming in and to locals, and they have to really fill big houses. There's a lot of 1,000+ seat houses on Broadway. And then off-Broadway is smaller, and so you can do more experimental works that don't have to appeal to so many people. And there's more off-Broadway theaters available.
Okay. And in terms of Broadway theater, do the theaters actually produce the play, or do you need individual producers to come in and help finance that? That's
changing. It used to be that you had to have individual outside producers come in, that the Broadway houses were just space. They were just a rental house, or there's the Schubert Company and several other families kind of ran all of the Broadway houses. And producers would come forward and say, here's our show, here's why we think it's going to be a hit, here's why we would love to get into this space, and then would come in and bring everything in with them. So the theater itself didn't produce it at all, an outside company did. Now that's changing, where there are some smaller Broadway houses that do actually produce. They used to be off-Broadway, and now they're turning Broadway. So there's actually more opportunities for playwrights now, because they don't have to be as big, and they can do their own productions and things, and for limited runs, and only run for a month or 6 weeks or something. They don't have to run like we think of Broadway shows going for years. So the nature of Broadway is changing a little bit, I'd say.
So let's rewind, okay? So you were born in Scotland.
I was.
And you were raised on reservations, I think in Colorado and New Mexico.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about that upbringing on in the reservations.
It was, it wasn't, I don't get any credit for it. It was my mom. She was the one. I was 2. My mom chose to work out on the reservation, the Navajo reservation, and then the Ute reservation up in Colorado, and so I was along. It was just the two of us. She was a single mom, I was a single child, and so I went where she went. And so I grew up, out in the desert of New Mexico, basically, until I was on some reservation until I was 15 or so. Yeah.
Okay, and now tell me about the journey from there to Cleveland.
From that, well, along the way, like I was always telling stories. Like even when I was little, I was drawing. I wanted to be a comic book artist. That was my first, like, that's my way in. And then I started doing school plays. Like I was a tooth in a play about teeth. That was my dramatic, that was my launch. And it went well.
It was your launch point.
It was my launch point. That was where the bug bit. So I was like, this is great. People clapped and I came on stage and I looked like a tooth and it was great. So I was very happy about that. So I wanted to do more plays. I did plays in high school then and in college. And then I came to Ohio University in Athens to get a graduate degree, an MFA in acting. And while I was there, I wrote a play. I took a playwriting class and wrote a play, which got produced on campus at OU, and went well. And I thought, oh, well, maybe I'll be a playwright and an actor. I can try to do both. That's doable. And then so I did an internship, came up to Cleveland to work at the Cleveland Playhouse. That's how I got to Cleveland. Oh. And I didn't plan to stay. I was just coming up to do 1 year, and then I was going to scoot on out and go somewhere. I didn't know where I was going to go. And I was mostly still focused on acting. And then, but then once I got here, I liked the city, and then my soon-to-be wife at that time came up and joined me, and we kind of stumbled into living in Cleveland and realized there was nowhere else we really wanted to be immediately, and it was a good place to raise a family. And I began to write more and more plays and do less and less acting, and I was lucky to get some early productions, some yeses along the way. And then that kind of set me on a course where I thought, well, I'll just be a playwright. And then I've been very lucky that that has continued to work out.
Wow. So do you believe that that time on the reservation in any way influenced your writing?
Yeah, I think so. I think it had to. And probably in a lot of ways I don't even know, right?
Right.
But the ways I can point to are that we all the little kids that were together there in that little kind of clump of houses where we lived were, none of us had much. It was all like, everyone was equally poor. So there was like one TV, like one family had a TV and everyone else would go there to watch something. But most of the time we were just running around outside playing. And so we had to make our own entertainment. And all we kind of had were like sticks and rocks, whatever we found. And so we would tell our own stories with that, like all kids do, right? That's part of every single child in the world can pick up a little something, a spool of thread or a spoon or something and be like, now I'm telling a story. And that's what we did. And so, but we were kind of forced into it because we didn't have a lot of options. We didn't, and we didn't know we didn't have a lot of options. That was just what we did, right? You ran outside and played. And so I think that sense of imagination and of play and the idea of stories just kind of tumbling forward and collaboration, right? So much that like, there was not a lot of kids to play with, so you played with whoever was right around and you had to get along and you had to make up the story together. So I think that element of it, that sense of that joy of storytelling and of storytelling with a group of people and of making something out of nothing, again, this idea of props and puppets almost and things like that, I think all of that set some things in motion. I don't know about the kinds of stories I tell, how those are related to my childhood, but the idea of that thrill of play, the sense of play in a play, that I think started back then. Do you have
a preference between comedy or drama?
I don't. I like switching it up. I don't. I think if I just wrote one, the same way I write children's plays, I write grown-up plays, I write. I try to write a bunch of different styles just to kind of, it keeps me fresh and keeps me thinking. So yeah, the comedy, but I also can't write one without the other. Like my comedies always have some drama woven into them, and the dramas always have comedy. So I don't write pure anything. I think it's a little mush of stuff I do.
Okay, so what I want to do is I want to take a look at a clip of Barking Dog by Eric Coble.
Ask me.
If this is really how it ended.
People ask me.
If this is how it began. As if.
There's a thread holding the two together.
As if.
The jungle we're in now should be timeless. From full arcing trees back into shoots, back into kernels wedged by dirty fingernails into hungry soil.
People ask me.
If it's true,
People ask me.
can you tell it again?
As if this telling will make it all adhere.
As if this telling will make it find the comfortable places inside you.
As if this telling will finally get to the truth.
But the truth is,
What I'm telling you happened.
This is.
So tell me about that play.
My Barking Dog? Well, that was an experiment for me. It's a two-person play, and I wanted to try to do magic or magic realism, to have this sense of like a real world, but then these kind of strange, mysterious things start happening in it. And I wanted to do all that with just storytelling. I just had these two actors, and I wanted them to directly talk to the audience and say, here's what happened to me, and here's what happened to me. And to make this kind of spooky, weird, funny story out of it. It's a story about these two people who live in an apartment building. They don't know each other. They're both pretty lonely. And then an actual coyote, starts showing up on their back stoop and coming up the steps and like hanging out at night. And it changes their lives kind of forever. And you never see the coyote. And that's one of the directions in the script. It's like, you must not see the coyote, because I don't want someone in a costume or anything coming in.
Right.
Coyote. No, that would defeat the purpose. But the audience sees it in their mind, right? That's the thing. Is like the actors are saying like, and then I see this thing that I don't know if it's is it a dog? Is it a wolf? Is it what? And the more the actors believe in it, then the audience sees it. And I really wanted to try to tell a whole story that way. So that's where My Barking Dog came from, and that's had a nice life too. I was surprised that people liked it as much as they did. It's a strange, strange play.
Do you have certain themes, Eric, that you write about, or how do the ideas flow to you?
They come from all over. I never know where it's going to pop up. Okay. It'll be from like walking through the neighborhood and thinking about someone. Like Velocity of Autumn came about because there was a neighbor of ours who, an older woman who had had numerous children. They were all grown up and gone. She was living alone in her house, and I knew from talking to her children that she was beginning to have problems taking care of herself. And so her children were really wanting to move her into an assisted living place, and I knew she did not want to go. I knew her enough to know she was like, I want to stay in this house, I will die in this house, this is my home. And I thought like but then it occurred to me as I was walking by one day, that like, well, she's inside, she's in that house, they're not, the children are out and around, so she's kind of got the advantage. If she wanted to like barricade herself in there, she could hold them off for a while. And I thought, well, that's a really strange idea. But then, so those kind of things, once something hits me as like, that's odd, then I kind of file it away as potential play. And that turned into Velocity of Autumn, about this older woman whose children want her to be kicked out. And she kind of holds herself hostage in her house, saying like, if you come in, I'll just burn the whole place down. So you leave me alone, and this is where I'm going to spend my final days. And then one of the children climbs in through a window and has to try to talk her out of holding herself hostage. So it's another strange play. All of them are kind of odd plays. But so I never know where the ideas are going to come from. Something I read in a newspaper or something someone says, or I never know.
So speaking of children, let's talk about Fairfield. That was a play produced at the Cleveland Playhouse.
Yeah.
How did those ideas come about?
That came about, there have been two plays I've written about education, or mostly about education, that were not for children. I write plays for children, but these were not. Bright Ideas was one that was about preschool and about the links that parents would go to for preschool. And then Fairfield was about elementary school, and about race relations within an elementary school, a very progressive school where everyone's trying to do the right thing and really trying to make everything work multiculturally, but where they just keep tripping over their own feet. And so that, the idea of that, the little seed of it came from with my own children. And we live in Cleveland Heights, and it's very multicultural. And again, everyone's got goodwill and is trying to make everything work, but naturally people just bump into each other. I mean, our country is built such that we're going to keep bumping into each other. And so it occurred to me that like when you've got, and then all these teachers who are trying to explain this insane system that we have set up in this country to little children, when it makes no sense. Like, right, this is what we have got with the way we built things. It does not make any sense. and yet you've got to explain it to these little kids. You're like, why are things the way they are? And I thought, like, what if you have a good, talented teacher, they can really do that. They can explain, like, well, this doesn't make any sense, but here's how we got here. But if you had a really like clumsy teacher, that could go horribly wrong, I thought. And then it becomes funny, like darkly funny, but like it could be, it was inappropriately funny. And that's where Fairfield began to come from, was this idea of like parents and teachers trying to do the right thing and just not having the skills to pull it off. And yeah, that's where that started.
Let's take a look at a clip of Fairfield.
Hi, I'm Jada Suzanne Dixon. I am the director of Fairfield, written by Eric Coble. The first time I read this play, I have to be really honest, I just didn't know how I felt about it. There were things that made me roll my eyes. There were things that made me shake my head. There were things that made me snort laugh out loud. And there were things that moved me. And I really like to explore this intersection between art and social justice.
Fairfield is about two families that have their kids in a elementary school. Their parents are kind of confronted with some race issues. And from that point on, we start to deal with middle and upper class families of different races being confronted with the racism they may be dealing with that they may not even know about. And hilarity ensues.
I mean, a month ago we were smiling at each other, waving across the parking lot at pickup time, right? I mean, I recognize you. How can waving be a lie? Hello! We're sharing an experience and I acknowledge your presence in a non-threatening way. You see, I meant that way.
I'm Cheryl McCallum. I'll be playing Angela Wadley. The school is kind of diverse, the community is diverse, but you have to tiptoe around it. So she's trying to find that balance between these two families. And I think she's there to keep the peace, to just make sure that she hears everyone.
Hi, I'm Mackenzie, and I'm playing Molly Flemington. Molly is really honestly trying to figure out how to live in this world and how to be a good person and how to be living in an integrated community and a diverse community. And she's very earnest about that intention and wanting it to work out.
Can I just say, we not only voted for Obama, oh Lord, but we worked for him. Worked our butts off. Oh, I think I left my non-racist trophies in the car. Let me go get them.
I'm Christina Fontaine. I'm playing Vanessa Stubbs. Every day in rehearsal, I literally get reminded about why I love this profession so much, because this show is one of the funniest shows I have ever read.
If you'll just...
Wait, your name is Stubbs? Is that what you said? You're that Devontae kid's mother, aren't you?
His name is Deontay! Deontay! Get it right! Deontay, sweetie, Mommy wants to talk to you about you. Go on playing.
In this show, the characters are really good people with really good intentions. They just make horrible decisions.
Jada is like so meticulously organized. She's got a plan for rehearsals, and in a play that's as tightly packed as this one is, with information and content and jokes and, you know, cultural references that you really need to understand in order to make a joke about them in a really insensitive but then sensitive way. She is really on top of it. She's super organized and intentional.
I'm okay if the audience gets uncomfortable and maybe shifts in their seat and guffaws and, you know, maybe taps their neighbor and says, "That's you." Like, I want all those things to happen in a way to help facilitate conversation that we're not really good at having today.
As a person of color, I'm looking at some of the things that the white character's saying, I'm like, oh, that's not good, but it's really funny. And even some of what my character and my wife, Vanessa's character, says as well. Like, just thinking like, ooh, that's a little off, but it's also really hilarious.
I think people should come to see it because they will be challenged, they will be uplifted, they will laugh their butts off, and more so, it will make them think. It will make them think about their own lives, their own beliefs, not beliefs, where they fit on this crazy scale that Fairfield is.
It's a really good time. Like, it's gonna be a fun time. You will not regret it.
That was a great show.
Thanks.
I went
Yeah,
to that show.
I was.
went
Yeah.
to that show, and at the time, Laura Kepley was the artistic director, and we had a funny conversation about that play.
Yeah. That was a really brave thing for Cleveland Playhouse to do, I think, you know, I mean, because it is a dicey kind of play, you know, and they had talkbacks after every show, and it really did stir a lot of conversation, which was great, I think. But yeah, I think they did a great job.
Eric, is there a certain impact that you hope to have your audience feel when they come to the theater and watch one of your productions?
I think I want them to be entertained, first of all. I really hope nobody's bored. I don't always achieve that, but that's my goal. That's my first goal. And then I want to give them something to talk about on the way home. I think like the plays that I'm least interested in are the ones that you see and they're fun, and then you know step out and you're like, well, where should we go to eat? Or like, what are we going to do when we get home? Or what's on tap for tomorrow? And you just like instantly forget it, right? It was just like a fast food meal. And I want to have something that's got some meat to it, whether it's funny or dramatic or scary or whatever, that gives the audience something to talk about on their way home and that they want to talk to their friends or neighbors about, you know, that they'll say like, I saw this show and it made me think about this and whatever. So hopefully they laugh, hopefully they are moved in some way, and then that they think. I think that's true for so many playwrights. It's the goal.
Why do you think theater is important?
I don't know if this is going to sound too weird, but I think it's one of the very few art forms that reflects the nature of reality, that reflects truth in a really clear way. And by that I mean that with a film or a recording music or television, books, art, paintings, you know, there is a sense that it's going to still be here, right? After, like, it's here in this moment, take a look at it, take it in. But if you come back a week later, a year later, 30 years later, it's going to be the same. You may have changed, but the piece of art is the same. The movie is the same as what you saw then. Right. And theater is not, right? Every moment is the only time that's happening. Right. And so those actors on that stage and that second, the whole art form says, pay attention. Did you see that? Did you notice that? Because it's never going to come again. Like what just happened, that moment will never be exactly the same way. How about now? Are you watching now? Are you watching now? And I think that what I mean by truth is that I think that's the nature of reality, right? This conversation between you and I will never be the same. We're recording it, we can share it, but I feel like there's an obligation to really pay attention in this moment, to really listen to each other, to be here, because we're never going to get this moment again. Right. And I think theater, live performance like that it accurately tells us that about the real world, that this is how nature of reality is. It's not going to last. You can't go back and revisit it. So you better pay attention now and now and now. And I think theater makes us do that, and I love that.
Well, that's a great answer, because that's true, you know.
Yeah, and I'm grateful for the other art form. You know, thank goodness we have movies that came out way before I was born, and books that were written hundreds of years before, and Shakespeare and things. I'm grateful these things that last, but I think there's something they make you believe that all things will go on forever, and theater doesn't even pretend that. Theater's like, it was done tonight. If you didn't see it, that's done. Right. Yeah, that was it.
Exactly, because when you come back the next night, it's going to be a totally different.
It'll be different. Little differences. Yeah.
Let's talk about someone who's dear to my heart, Dorothy Silver, the First Lady of Cleveland Theater, and I've mentioned her on several of my shows, and the reason is she's worthy of that. Yeah. Can you tell me about your first experience with Dorothy?
My very first experience would be seeing her on stage. I saw her as an actor at Dubama Theater first, and I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know her reputation. I didn't know her history. I was just some young punk coming to the theater, and I was like, oh, okay, sure, there's an old lady on stage. She's a good actor. That's all I know. And then I actually auditioned for her as an actor myself. She was directing a show at Dubama that was going to have Reuben Silver in it, called Substance of Fire, and they were casting 3 other actors to be in the show with them. and or 4 other actors. And I auditioned just because I was auditioning for everything. And again, I didn't know she was anything special. I knew she was an actor and a director. And I was cast in the show. And so I got to know her then and began to see like the amount of wisdom that she had, because she had just been doing this for so long and had been so perceptive and such a great artist for so long, that I began to, just in her stories and in the way she approached the work, I began to see that there was something special about her. And then we became friends through that. And then as I moved over into playwriting, I asked her to be in some readings of mine and things like that to help me out as an actor herself.
So gracious.
What she did, she's so gracious. And yeah, she always said yes when she could, and Ruben as well. And so we began to, just to get to know each other better and better that way. And then so when Velocity of Autumn came up at Beck Center, she was the obvious first choice. And she wanted to do it, and it was magical. And then we got to work together a few other times after that. But yeah, she changed my life. And she showed me how to make a living as an artist, in a way, how to make a life as an artist, because that's how, just the way she lived.
Yeah, they were so important to me. Ruben was my professor at Cleveland State. And at that time, I didn't know Dorothy. Dorothy was a director, and right maybe 2 or 3 days before we were open, Dorothy would come into the theater and just sit in the back. But everyone knew her reputation. They knew who she was. And so the next day, we would go up to Ruben and say, "Ruben, what did Dorothy say?" And he would always say, "Yeah." But you know, we always wanted her approval and her opinion. Who was the director of Velocity of Autumn at the Beck Center?
Eric Schmiedel directed it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, playwright and director and actor, musician, all-around guy in Cleveland. Eric Schmiedel directed it. David Hansen was the other actor in it. He worked with he also actor and playwright. Worked with Dorothy on that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have certain topics that you enjoy writing about, or? I normally write about the past. Very seldom are my works in the present. I love the past. I love the time I grew up. I don't know what that says about me, but almost everything, like The Mighty Scarabs, was in the past, in the 1960s.
Yeah, that's a great play.
And thank you.
Yeah.
That's an honor coming from you.
It was really moving. Yeah, it's a lovely play.
So do you have certain topics? Have you ever written anything about living on the reservation, or took any concepts from that?
Some concepts. Yeah, I mean, I think to some degree, this idea of coyote that we were talking about with my barking dog, the coyote is such a big part of that.
Yeah.
So I think those kind of ideas and some of the legends and myths and things, I think have worked their way into some of my stories. I don't think I've written any stories about life on the reservation. Well, no, not really. I've written stories about the desert, but not necessarily about the reservation. Yeah, my topics are kind of whatever, again, comes to mind. I've written about the future a fair amount. I like writing like near future science fiction kind of stuff sometimes, and about the present, some about the past, some biographies. I've done a piece on Edgar Allan Poe, Sojourner Truth. I mean, there's people whose lives I think are inherently dramatic and are interesting to see on stage. But yeah, I think the topics, I mean, I'm always, I guess one of the things I keep coming back to is the role of wildness in our world, because in our country we have so much of our country we have kind of really worked to contain the wild, not just the wild like nature, but I mean wild personalities, wild ideas, everything that we really want to have everything contained, and we're a lot about being safe, and we want to feel comfortable, and we want to know where we're going tonight, and we want to know what the future holds, and we really want that. And I think that that's also not really part of the worldwide truth. I think that chaos is the worldwide truth, and a sense of wildness and things surprising us and coming out of nowhere, and strange ideas and things. So I find that I write in different ways about that a lot, about people who are trying to live normal, regular lives, and then something strange happens that is out of their control that begins to send them spiraling into having to deal with this wildness. That happens a lot.
What do you enjoy most about your work?
What do I enjoy most? I like when it's done. That's true. I'm one of those people, I don't know who it was, who's Tennessee Williams or somebody, who said, like, I like having written. Like the actual writing process is not very pleasurable.
Right.
Usually, it's sometimes, or you get in the groove and it's really great.
Yeah.
But a
can
lot
be
of times it's
tedious.
tough,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It can be, especially starting, like when you have to get started
Right,
on the thing.
right,
It's a blank page and whatever. For me, it's really tough. So when I write end of play on a script, that's a good feeling. That's one of my top feelings. It's like, yeah, look at that, it's done. For now, first draft is done. And then just watching it with an audience and seeing them like it. If they're laughing at something together, again, knowing that I have created something that is bringing the actors on stage and the audience together in a moment, that like everyone's getting to be bigger than themselves in a way. The actors are being not just themselves, but this character. The audience is not just themselves, but an audience. That like we're all slightly bigger than ourselves in that moment and doing the same thing. It's the same with watching a sport. You know, we're watching the Guardians, same event. It's like feeling I'm part of something bigger than myself. But I love being the cause, the little seed of that a story I thought of at some point is allowing us all to come together. That's a great feeling.
What do you think the greatest challenge of a playwright is?
Whew, there's so many. I think believing in yourself, because there's so many places and people out there in the world who will tell you no, who tell me no, tell you. I mean, it's just the nature of the art is that everyone
told no all the time.
Yeah, exactly. I get easily like 100 no's for any yes I get. So to keep on going in the face of that, to believe like, no, I think I have something that need to be told. I need to tell this story, even when the world is like, no, we don't really want to hear that story right now. But to keep on going is tough. That's a big challenge. Getting produced is a huge challenge because there just aren't enough spaces. There's enough slots in everyone's seasons for all the great work that needs to be done. Finding a way to balance that with whatever a money job is, because it's so hard to make money as a playwright. So how do you find, where do you inch out the time to write if you're holding down a 40-hour-a-week job or something, and how do you raise a family in that? How much, just so many questions, yeah.
When do you think a playwright should get an agent?
I don't, there's no one answer to that. It varies. I think when one, not right out the gate, not a brand new playwright, because most agents, they want to see that you have a bunch of stuff, because an agent wants to sell things. That's their whole goal, is to make money for yourself and them and everybody. So they want to know that if you have a really good script that's very exciting and that some people have shown some interest in, because ultimately the agents want you to make money for them. So if you look like you have a script that will help make the agent some money, great, that's the first step. But then they usually want you to have like 4 or 5 scripts so that then they're ready to go the pipeline. So they know you're not a one-hit wonder.
Gotcha.
Right? So I would not even begin to think about an agent until one had a bunch of scripts under one's belt. And even then, it's just luck of the draw. I mean, so much, because the agents are so, they only have so many people they can take on and do the work well. So they get filled up quickly, and they can't take any more clients at a certain point, and still serve those clients. So you have to catch the right agent at the right time, which is just luck, and have the script ready. And frankly, a lot of most of the productions I've had were not through my agent. They were through people I knew, because I got to know a director at a theater or an actor who then went to a theater or whatever. So most of what I've done has not. An agent is very helpful for negotiating contracts, I have found, just because I don't have a great business sense that way. So it's great to have someone to step in and say, here are the protections the artist needs. But in terms of getting the work, an agent is helpful, but it's still mostly on me to open those doors. Yeah, very much so, very much so.
Yeah, because you think right off the bat that the agent is the one that's doing
right.
it.
That's what we all think, and that's what we've been trained to think. And they can open doors. There's certain theaters that will only take work from an agent.
Got you.
Totally real, but that's all really the agent can do, is get you in that door and maybe make a phone call or something. But they have limited powers as well. And just again, speaking for myself, I would say that again, most of the jobs I've gotten were via me and people I knew, or via kind of dumb luck that someone happened to read the script here online or something like that. And then my agent has come in and helped me guide the script forward. Yeah.
So what's next for you? What are you working on? Give us a hint of
what can I can give a hint.
On. Yeah.
I can't. I'm actually one of the weird new things I'm doing now is I'm working in different fields where I have to keep signing non-disclosure agreements, which is exciting and fun and weird to me because I'm used to be able to say blah blah blah. Here's what I'm working on.
Right.
And now I can't talk like that as much.
Exactly.
But so I'm working on different plays for different theaters. A few in Cleveland potentially, and then some out of town, and then some stuff overseas that'll be interesting new challenges that are kind of big spectacle shows. These are brand new. Yeah, these are brand new places.
Okay.
And then there's always some pieces that are like a goal. I think as a playwright is kind of to send the plays out so they have a life that's not part of me at this point, right? So I have a number of plays that are out there. I've been very lucky that they are. That have their lives that don't involve me at all. Like I hear about them, and hopefully they pay a royalty.
Right, exactly.
But they don't require my attention anymore. And so the new stuff is what always my attention. Like how do I write this thing, or who do I need to talk to about this? And it's that launch, that birth. The birth of a play is where it's the most intensive, right? Because as a parent, that's where you are most needed. The play, the baby child is helpless, right? Is needs your full attention and help to go out into the world. And then as it grows up, hopefully, it goes out and makes its own friends. The play goes out, meets new people, and goes off and has a life, and then contacts you. You get a phone call every so often. You get an email saying I'm in Seattle. You get a check, yes, in that case, a literal check, and so you can keep tabs on them, but you don't have to pay close attention. So right now I'm mostly focused on the new baby plays, I guess.
So are you a playwright that may be working on multiple plays? Because I can't do that. I have to write one. I have to work on one, and then after it's done, then I'll go to the next. But I
think that's probably a pretty healthy thing. But the way you do it, I think is a good way. It's not how I do it, but I think that for me, I'm always working on a bunch of different projects, but they're all at different states. Like when it comes time to write a play, like if I'm going to write Velocity of Autumn, that's most of my focus. That's 90% of my focus until I've gotten it finished. Just because that's the way I work is that something I have to think about it. But then when it comes time to write it, I just go and I try to get that first draft done. While I'm working on that first draft, there may be like 12 other projects that are in different states of like a vague idea or something I'm going to do rewrites on later in the month or whatever. So it's a different states that way, but I am not trying to write like two different storylines at the same time. I can't really do that. I have to set something down, just do this, set that down, just do this. But I do try to keep a bunch of things going, partly to keep me sane because so many of those things are never going to come to anything, right? I mean, like I can write them all I want, but then they're never going to find the home that I want them to find, or they'll just kind of fade away or whatever. So for me, it's a little like buying lottery tickets, that like the more I have out there, the greater chance I have of something getting produced, and of having less heartbreak, honestly, because that's the hard part in the way that you do it, and the way, I mean, any of us have heartbreak when we work on a play, we love it, and the world doesn't respond to it like we'd like. It's not a big hit. People aren't asking to see it. And that can be so heartbreaking sometimes. And for me, I think I've built this kind of little defensive practice for myself of having these multiple shows. So even if something never catches like I wish it to, I can be sad about that, but I've got these other things to focus on. Right. So I can quickly turn to that. And I think it's sort of self-preservation a little bit, too, emotional self-preservation.
Hey, well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Eric, for being on.
It's been very
show,
fun.
Man.
Thank you.
It's been incredible.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank my special guest, Eric Coble, for hanging out with us today on Creative Focus. So that's it, Cleveland. We're out. But remember, a true artist is not only inspired, but inspires others. I'm Cornell Hubert Calhoun III for Creative Focus and TV20. Until the next time becomes our time, be well, be safe.